Welcome, everyone, to Design for Sensing using silicon nitride for sensor technology and biosensing. My name is Kevin McCumber, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of Spark Photonics, an integrated photonics design services company based in the United States. Spark Photonics is also the North American sales partner for Luceda Photonics. I first want to start with some thank yous. I'd like to thank our featured presenters from SiPhox Health and from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. I'd also like to thank our partners at AIM Photonics, as well as Luceda Photonics, without whom none of this would have been possible. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you, the audience, for attending either live or watching the video afterwards. It's your interest in integrated photonics that motivates us and keeps us going. So thank you. Thank you for joining. Just a couple of housekeeping notes here as we kick off. These slides will not be distributed, but this event is being recorded, and it will be posted on YouTube and distributed via email to registrants. We ask that you please hold your questions till the end of the webinar when we have about 15 minutes allotted for Q&A. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can use the raise hand feature in Zoom here, and I'll call on you to unmute. As many of you know, silicon nitride is a prevalent platform within integrated photonics, and it finds myriad applications in sensing. I'm very excited to introduce our first speaker to talk about the world-class silicon nitride platform at AIM Photonics. Amit Dikshit is the Design Enablement Manager at AIM Photonics, where he's responsible for PDK development, compact modeling, and measurements. And with that, Amit, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kevin. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Before I get started, I would like to thank Spark Photonics and Luceda for this opportunity. And so I'm going to talk about AIM Photonics silicon nitride offerings. Before I get started, I just want to show this message here. Whatever is shared in this section of the presentation is not the official policy of any of these US government agencies. An introduction to AIM Photonics. AIM Photonics is a manufacturing innovation institute that is funded by the US Department of Defense, with a mission to promote the silicon photonics technology ecosystem in the US. Within the technology area, we offer different flavors of silicon photonics technology. We have our own packaging house, where we offer various packaging options and also work on packaging technologies. We also offer assembly services, as well as test offering for limited volume and prototype applications. What is unique about us? There are a few points that are mentioned here, and I would like to draw your attention to the customization part here. So if there are concepts that our partners and collaborators are interested in, integrating new materials, that is typically not possible at commercial large-scale foundries, we work with those materials as well. And to summarize, here's a quote from our Chief Operating Officer, David Harame, where we say, "We do weird well." There are several different technology areas that we address within AIM Photonics. And we not only work on datacom and telecom applications, which are typically driven by high volume, high speed concerns, but we also work in some of the emerging areas. And one of them is quantum computing, where we offer our technologies. And the other area, which is the focus of this webinar, which is the silicon nitride technology. And this technology finds applications in chemical and biosensing, as well as AR and VR applications. And we have our offerings for these applications here. What does our silicon nitride technology offering include? So currently we offer two waveguide layers, the first and the second silicon nitride. And in order to enable sensing applications, we also offer these sensing trenches where the oxide above the waveguide is etched away. And designers have the options of exposing the waveguide to various biological or other chemicals. We also have another trench for edge couplers. Years of technology development has resulted in this offering, which offers very low waveguide losses across 700 to 1600 nanometer range. And some of these numbers are shown here, which we have also published. There is a MPW technology offering for silicon nitride. The MPW is scheduled every quarter, and all of the details are given on our website, including the pricing information as well. We have a 90-day rapid turnaround time, and customers get 20 chips for the circuits that they design. So please look at this URL to get more information. Our silicon nitride PDK offering contains a wide variety of components, more than 40 components targeting this wavelength range. That is the state today, where we are offering 700 to 1600 nanometer components. But very soon, we'll also offer components in the shorter wavelength range, extending all the way up to 500 nanometers. And some of the details of these technologies and components are shown in this paper. Our silicon nitride PDK supports the Luceda platform. And if users have access to Luceda, they should be able to design their PICs. We also offer some P cells, which aid in layout. There is schematic simulation support and DRC support. Our PDKs offer a very clear documentation. We show all of the device and component plots, along with the overlay of compact models. Our PDKs are offered through our secure PDK distribution system, which is based off of GitLab. And please visit this website shown here to get more information about how to access the PDK. Our PDK currently supports 2 component libraries that are developed by our partners. The first component library is developed by our partners and collaborators at Spark Photonics. And this library contains a suite of passive components specifically targeted for sensor application in the wavelength range of 700 nanometers to 1300 nanometers. This library is fully supported in the Luceda platform. And here we show some examples, just representative example of a code that is written in Luceda platform and the resulting layout that is shown in K-layout. Another component library that we support is from our partners at the US Naval Research Laboratory. And this component library is called as the TLX component library. The number of components and the type of components that are supported within this library is all given on our website, and the table is shown here. An example is shown of a broadband directional coupler, which shows very good performance from 700 to about 950 nanometer. And again, the measured data as well as the compact model is clearly presented in the documentation. Also included within the TLX component library is a suite of ring resonator components, which are very critical components for sensing applications. The ring resonators that are offered at various bands with different cladding material options. And all of this is to support sensor-based circuits. We also support compact models that are sub-circuit-based models here. And an example is shown here, which we've also presented in the publication shown here. And the model versus hardware is clearly specified for this ring resonator device, where we show the spectrum and different parameters of the ring resonator, such as the Q, FSR, and extinction ratio. To summarize, AIM Photonics offers silicon nitride technology along with PDK offerings, which helps promote the silicon photonics design ecosystem in this area. And I would encourage the users to take a look at these different links to find out more about the technology. And that is it from my side. Thanks, Kevin.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Amit. I love that quote. We do weird well. I think we might have to adopt something like that for Spark. With that, our next speaker is a photonics design engineer here at Spark Photonics, where he leads Spark's work in silicon nitride with AIM Photonics, including the development of the silicon nitride component library that Amit just told you about. Cooper, the floor is yours.
Great. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen real quick then. Can everybody see this here?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. So, hi, my name is Cooper Hurley. I'm a design engineer at Spark Photonics. We are a company that offers technical services such as design and photonic layout. We also offer PDK development and consulting. Additionally, we're the North American partners of Luceda Photonics, handling distribution and support of Luceda products such as IPCIS. We also sell AIM Photonics PIC kits, which can be used in workforce development as a tool for bringing up characterization capabilities at your research group or your company. So we're delivering this talk today to discuss one section of our services in particular, PDK development. When developing a PDK, it's important to understand that any platform should be coupled with an initial list of photonic components to help improve user experience and expedite R&D time. These are commonly referred to as component libraries, and they're usually provided by the foundry as a list of GDS cells with corresponding documentation detailing their expected performance over their specific band of operation. Component libraries, their offerings vary with regard to the specific application, but typically basic components offered are splitters, directional couplers, edge or grading couplers, MMIs, polarization-based devices, and even active components as well. By offering these components with validated results, the bar for making the jump into an integrated photonics platform is effectively lowered, and a photonics design can become far more accessible. Additionally, the confidence that a designer has that their design will come out operating as expected the first time is much higher, which can help alleviate any anxiety related to the cost of an MPW run. And on this slide here, you can see an example of a design that we submitted previously to AIM Photonics. This was just a bunch of devices that we've been characterizing as a part of this work that we're discussing today. So I can pivot now to discuss the main reason why I'm talking. We have released an initial silicon nitride-based component library for the silicon nitride platform at AIM. This is our second library we've released for AIM Photonics for silicon nitride components in particular. This component library targets wavelengths across the I, Z, Y, and J bands between 700 and 1300 nanometers, which are of particular interest to many of those in the sensing space. We are also happy to mention that this library was also released for Luceda IPCIS. This platform with its relevant layers and rules, you can use our components that we've released for it or design your own on the layers that we've built into that PDK that has been released. Some of the components that we've released here, which are all white boxed, I should mention, so you can pick apart the design yourselves and make alterations where you see fit, include waveguides, Y splitters, 1 and 2x2 MMIs, layer transitions between the first nitride and second nitride, edge couplers, grading couplers, and polarization rotator. Now, the documentation that we've provided with this PDK is still in an infant stage, relatively speaking. It's a combination of simulated and experimental results that we hope to transition to a majority experimental results in the future, as well as continue to release components and diversify and increase the number of components that are a part of the list that I just shared. So beyond that, I'd like to say thank you. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. And I've included my contact information here, so feel free to reach out. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Cooper. Next up is JJ Hu. Professor of Material Science and Engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. JJ's work spans many applications in silicon nitride, and it's great to have him here to speak about silicon nitride photonics for on-chip sensing. Thank you, Professor Hu.
Okay, thank you, Kevin, for this introduction. Let me share my screen here. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. So again, thank you, Kevin, for the invitation. I will here be discussing about essentially an application of silicon nitride photonics, specifically for waveguide enhanced Raman spectroscopy. So let me start by just briefly introducing about why we are looking into waveguide enhanced Raman. So on the left-hand side, what I'm showing here is a photo of a conventional Raman setup. Those actually rely on essentially macroscopic refractive optics. They are actually bulky and costly. And also, they typically have a limited sensitivity. And that's why there's actually a motivation into essentially using on-chip platform to actually replace or complement some of these conventional Raman systems. So the idea of waveguide enhanced Raman is instead of essentially coupling light from free space to the end light, you actually use essentially a waveguide that's actually transparent at the Raman wavelength, so that when light propagates in this waveguide, it can actually have evanescent interactions with molecule in the surrounding environment, and therefore the Raman excited photons can also back couple into the waveguide, and then they can be collected at the end. So the advantage of this type of on-chip Raman compared to conventional free space Raman is that it can actually offer higher sensitivity because the light can actually propagate in chip for long distance, and therefore this actually increases the opportunity to interact with another molecules to produce Raman scattered photons. And on top of that, you also get the other advantages as any kind of on-chip systems in terms of manufacturing cost, as well as size, weight, as well as robustness. So one unique challenge I do want to mention compared to free space Raman is that because now you have light actually propagating in the waveguide, it means that the waveguide material itself can also generate Raman signals. And this can actually be added on top of the Raman signal you want to detect for molecules. And this is the background you essentially sort of have to filter out. Okay, so and just to prove my point, what I'm showing you here on the left-hand side is a free space Raman spectrum, and on the right side is the Raman spectrum for the same material. But now you can clearly see that this added background essentially is just because of the fact that we have the waveguide material that also interact with the pump. So therefore, if you want to optimize the system, you want to enhance the signal coming from your analyte to a molecule, and you also have to suppress any kind of background signal coming from a waveguide. So for that, we did quite a bit of study, looking into what are different waveguide geometries and actually waveguide material choices that can actually optimize this performance. So long story short, you can actually refer to kind of this paper to more detailed calculations, how we actually did it. In terms of waveguide geometry, we find out that for silicon nitride platforms, it turns out it's actually the transverse magnetic or TM polarization in a chip waveguide that gives you the best sensitivity. The rationale behind it is that for TM polarization, you have a minimal interaction with the sidewalls, and therefore you have low scattering loss that you can allow have long waveguides to increase the interaction between molecules in the excitation. It's also really important to look at what material that actually is optimal for this application. And so what I'm citing here is actually some study by essentially by a Belgium group. They look at different waveguide material for on-chip Raman, and turns out silicon nitride is actually the best choice because it offers essentially, if you look at vertical axis here, it has a relatively high signal, and it also has a very low background that eventually give you the best field merit. Now, one thing I want to mention here is if you look at material like tantalum oxide, they also have fairly good performance, but they are definitely not nearly as scalable as silicon nitride. You don't find like facilities like AIM will provide you with very high quality silicon nitride materials. So that's why we're going for silicon nitride. And I just also want to quickly mention that you cannot just go to a random foundry and just ask for silicon nitride and it's just going to work magically. Turns out the process that you use to actually make the silicon nitride is really important to lower the loss and also minimize any background Raman and fluorescence signal. So in that regard, we can actually test that we actually tried the low-loss silicon nitride platform from AIM. It actually works exceptionally well. It's a very high quality material that I highly recommend for Raman applications. So now next, just quickly talk a little bit about the kind of device design. So for one challenge for a lot of this waveguide and Raman is how to actually couple light on chip. And you can actually use things like essentially microscope objective to focus light to the waveguide end facet. But the challenge here is that this is a technique that's a bit hard to scale if you want to have industry scale implementations. So our idea was that we want to integrate fibers directly with waveguide platform. And but the one challenge there is that the fiber itself also has a fluorescent background, and you need to find a way to actually filter out. So the idea we came up with is to essentially, instead of looking at forward scatter Raman, we now look at the back scatter Raman signal. So because Raman scattering is actually isotropic, you get both forward scattering as well as backward scattering. They have actually equal amplitude. But if you collect the backward scatter Raman signal, this allows you to essentially separate it efficiently with the essentially forward propagating pump, and that will allow you to actually boost the signal to noise ratio. So to implement this design, we come up with this design here. It's actually a line will actually go through a 2x2 coupler from this on left hand side, goes into these two spirals here where you actually generate Raman signal. And the back scatter line goes again through a coupler and then goes to another port, so that it's actually fully separated from the forward propagating pump. So we implemented a few years back. We actually demonstrated that we can actually now integrate it with optical fibers with minimum amount of background fluorescence. And what I'm showing you this slide is actually the first demonstration of such a packaged Raman, where we actually tested on this model molecule IPA. The sensitivity is not great, only like 5%. Basically because we're actually using in-house fabricated silicon nitride waveguides, where the performance, of course, is far below what you can get from a foundry like AIM. So after that demonstration, I want to mention that we actually spun out this company, InSpec, that they actually are looking into how to actually commercialize this kind of technology for chemical manufacturing process monitoring. They have also developed this packaging platform that allows integration of fibers with the silicon nitride chip, and that they have a robust packaging that can be directly integrated with essentially single-use bioreactors. So in the last few slides, I'll just give you one quick example of how their system is actually implemented in practical applications. In this case, they're actually looking for a biomanufacturing process, essentially produce this compound called p-turmeric acid using yeast. Okay. Basically what you would do is you essentially mix all the ingredients along with the cell or the yeast in a bioreactor. It's then going to grow and actually produce this compound. However, the challenge is that this compound turns out it's actually toxic for the cell. So if you just let it sit there and accumulate, it's actually going to kill the cell and stop the reaction. Okay. So the idea is that you want to have some kind of continuous extraction process where you continuously remove this excess product so that you don't actually intoxicate your cells. But to be able to do that, you need to actually be able to perform real-time measurement so you know exactly what's the concentration inside your reaction containers. So that's what they did. They actually were able to implement this with enhanced Raman spectroscopy. In this first slide, I'm showing you actually an example of the result of monitoring these materials actually in DI water. They were able to get a root mean square error of prediction down to about 60 milligram per liter, which is actually much better than the actually specified requirement by the users to be 300 milligram per liter. They then proceed to look into this not just in like a DI water, but actually in the cultural medium. And from the left-hand side here, you can see that from this principal component analysis, these different color points essentially correspond to different concentrations, data collected in different concentrations, versus a pure cultural media without this reagent product, as this orange dots. So the fact that they are all well separated, again, indicates that you can actually detect these molecules reliably, meeting the customer specification. So they have also performed on-site tests. You can see here that they actually have a little box system where they actually integrate all the spectrometers, lasers into one single box. And then you have this kind of a single-use probes that directly get integrated into this bioreactor to perform real-time continuous monitoring. So long story short, they were actually able to demonstrate that with integration of these Raman sensors, they were able to actually enhance yield by 100% compared to a case where there's no real-time monitoring. So I'm actually going to conclude here, and I definitely want to thank the people who actually did the work. Jerome Michon is a former student of mine, now the CEO of InSpec. As well as Tim, they actually did all the excellent explorations. And I will conclude my talk here. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Professor Hu. It was really neat to see. Now I'd like to turn our attention to SiPhox Health, who recently raised a $27 million funding round for their at-home testing innovation that uses integrated photonics. We have with us Kyle Preston, Director of Chips and Sensors at SiPhox. Looking forward to hearing what you have to present with us, Kyle.
Right there. Thanks very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Great. Thanks very much for the invitation and for the other great talks. I'm going to tell you about SiPhox Health. We are a Series A early stage startup in the Boston area, about 25 employees. And what we're up to is we want to make it very easy and affordable to measure biomarker levels in your blood. There are important reasons to want to do this, most importantly around chronic disease. So in the US in particular, we spend a lot of money on healthcare, but we have a lot of sick people. There can be many different causes for this, but ideally we want to move upstream from just managing chronic disease and actually do something early enough in people's lives to help prevent it. A major part of that moving forward is going to be getting people access to the kinds of biomarker data that I'm going to tell you about, which can give you a feedback loop where you can adjust something in your lifestyle, measure the results on your health with actual data, and find what works for you to optimize your health. So at SiPhox, we believe the way to do this is with silicon photonics, where we can design precise control of the properties of light, the phase and the wavelength. We can make many sensors on a chip, multiplex together, and these chips can scale up to low cost if we design the system properly. The lower the cost, the more people we can reach. So we think this is an exciting opportunity to improve people's health and scale up a real consumer application that puts silicon photonics into people's homes. So before I get into the photonics, in parallel with the photonics development that I'll tell you about, we have a commercial side of the company that launched a mail-in blood test, kind of as an emulation of an at-home test, which is what we're developing photonics hardware for, to see how people would use something like this. So we partnered with a commercial blood testing lab in the US to do this. We packed many biomarkers into one test, and we're basically selling it at cost. The response has been great. We have a bunch of enthusiasts who are using this. So if you're curious about your own biomarker data, feel free to check this out on our website. You can also read up on the different types of biomarkers that we're measuring. So these are markers for cardiovascular health, inflammation, metabolic health, hormones, some of the most important categories that people are interested in. So if we zoom out from here, this is a look at the relative concentrations of some of the thousands of biomarkers that are in your blood. So these are proteins and hormones and small molecules that all play different roles and functions in your body. You can see the y-axis here is a log scale. So there's about 10 orders of magnitude difference between the most abundant and the least abundant molecules that are shown here. So there are some real science and engineering challenges to measure this full range of biomarkers at home. It's not a coincidence that, for example, you can measure your glucose at home very easily, but not necessarily your insulin currently. So these types of sensitive measurements are typically done using optical techniques in big central lab testing equipment. So how can we do this with silicon photonics? The foundation of this has been around for at least 20 years. There's a lot of publication history behind it. Fundamentally, it's very similar to some types of established lab equipment like SPR, surface plasmon resonance, or BLI, biolayer interferometry, which are common tools that are used in biolabs. So very briefly, we need to fabricate optical waveguide structures, which are exposed to their environment. We use surface chemistry processes to functionalize the surface with antibodies or other capture reagents that can then bind the molecule that we're interested in, that we want to measure. And then when a sample is flowed on top, when a molecule comes in and binds, it displaces a very small amount of water and replaces it with this organic molecule, which has a higher refractive index than water. So as the light is traveling through, it'll pick up a small phase shift for every molecule that comes and binds on the waveguide. meaning that light slows down as it goes through. So we can design this waveguide. Then we can wrap up that waveguide into different kinds of device designs that turn that phase shift into some kind of wavelength or intensity shift that we can measure on a photodetector. So that's what's shown in the middle here. This is some device with a resonant spectrum with a resonant wavelength before and after molecules bind to it. If you plot that wavelength as a function of time, which is what's shown on the right, then you get a plot called a sensorgram, where we can monitor this binding reaction actually in real time as it happens. So there are lots of great device examples in the literature. A couple are shown here. The two main classes of devices are interferometers and resonators, especially ring resonators have a lot of attention. So we can design these devices with arbitrarily large device sensitivity. They'll always run up against other trade-offs that we care about, like the footprint of the device, the dynamic range that you need for your measurement, manufacturability, repeatability, all the things that you need to be a real product. So what all these kinds of devices have in common is the instrumentation that we use to measure them. So obviously you need a light source and a detector. Historically, you basically have two choices. You either need an expensive wavelength tunable laser with a simple photodetector, or you can flip it around. You could design to use a broadband light source, which might be cheap, depending on what you need. But then you need a high resolution spectrometer at the other side, like an OSA, which is expensive. So in either of these cases, you really want picometer level accuracy or resolution in order to resolve small binding signals from your device. So one of our big breakthroughs at SiPhox is around this instrumentation. We're really proud of the system we've built where we have a tunable laser, which is highly accurate, but also very small and low cost, such that we could actually put it into the home. So this involves some great engineering, advancements in photonics and hardware and software, all co-designed together. So this is how the system looks. This is our first generation hardware. So the white box contains the transmit and receive capabilities for our optical path. The light goes into our disposable cartridge and then into our sensor chip, which is in the lower right here, which has optical I/O at the top of the chip. This version of the chip has 15 individually addressable ring resonator sensors, which we can read out all in parallel with the reader instrument. We then build microfluidics around it so that we can have a liquid sample that we pull or push across the sensor surface. Here's just a brief look at how we make these cartridges. So we start with a photonics wafer, which can have thousands of chips, many tens of thousands of individual sensors on it. The remaining process steps we currently run in-house. So we functionalize the sensor, which can be done by printing different capture antibodies onto each sensor to make a multiplex test. And then we optically package the chip and then fluidic packaging to build it into this cartridge. So here's some photonic data measuring our chips on our reader hardware. So here we're showing a typical quality factor on the order of about 100,000 for a ring resonator. We find that's a good regime to be in. The arrows are showing the full width half max. You can see we're easily resolving small wavelength shifts that are a fraction of the line width that's shown here. Down below, here we're reading out all the sensors on the chip in parallel and tracking their wavelengths as we flow different salt solutions on top of it. And then if you zoom in, we can find the temporal noise is on the order of a picometer. So we're really happy with this system's ability to interrogate photonic sensors on a chip and measure these small optical wavelength shifts from which can come from molecular binding. So then here's a look at the full experimental apparatus running in a lab. Currently, the reader box is controlled from a PC. One of the nice things about building inexpensive hardware is that we can build a lot of it. So we have dozens of these systems running in our lab. So the assay I'll show in the next few slides is for a molecule called C-reactive protein, or CRP, which is an interesting inflammation marker that tells you about your health, and it actually responds to changes in your body. So it's a good candidate for a biomarker that you might want to keep an eye on more than just once a year or every couple of years when you're at your doctor's office. So in general, we engineer different kinds of assays to run on our platform. So what we do is first use samples with a known concentration to build up a calibration curve, like is shown here. So this is a typical calibration curve that will measure for one set of assay conditions. And it's measured across many independent chips and cartridges, so it's the repeatability that's really important. That's what ultimately determines your assay sensitivity or your limit of detection on the low side. The assay time is just a few minutes. We're measuring these binding kinetics in real time, so we don't have to let the binding reaction go all the way to equilibrium, which can take some time to do. So that's a nice feature. You can look at essentially the beginning of the reaction to measure this concentration. And finally, what we're showing is that we engineered this assay to measure the full clinical range for a high sensitivity CRP assay that you might get at a doctor's office or at Quest or LabCorp, which for this assay is 0.2 to 10 micrograms per milliliter. So the final few slides here, where we really want to go with this is into the home. That's a big leap going from the lab into someone's home. There's many different kinds of challenges in doing this, which we've been tackling, like shown here. So what we did is a preliminary at-home technology demo where some employees took the system home over a holiday. Everybody ran the system independently, compared the fully at-home tests against the mail-in tests that I showed you before, which takes about a week to come back by the time you have shipping and everything, compared to the at-home test is a little more instant gratification. Again, it's about 5 minutes to get the results. The user experience for this is obviously very, very important. The main point here is that the complexity for this workflow is about on par with a COVID test. So we're collecting a sample, which in this case is from a finger stick. We mix it with some reagents. We add it into the cartridge, and then we press go. So there's nothing too scary going on here. A couple of photos. So these are some of my colleagues just casually measuring our biomarkers at home using silicon photonic chips. And here are the main results. So we're really happy with this as a first shot. So everybody successfully collected the results. We had a good correlation between the two methods, so the mail-in test on the x-axis and the at-home test on the y-axis. We're certainly not done here. There are many performance improvements still coming down the pipe for really every aspect of the system that we talked about. So to wrap it up, you can optimize your health today with the help of biomarker measurements, but we need to drive down the cost of it using semiconductor technology. So I showed you a look at some of our technology and an at-home demo that we think bodes well for formal FDA studies, which is what we're heading towards for a medical device. What we're up to currently is developing a menu of assays for different biomolecules, as well as building out the next generation of our hardware. Just one parting thought down in the corner here is that photonics is really just one piece of the puzzle of what we work on. It's a very important piece, but so are microfluidics and surface chemistry and algorithms and everything else that ties into it for such a multidisciplinary product. If you want some more info about what I talked about, I made a Photonics West paper a couple months ago. You can go check that out. And these are some of my fantastic multidisciplinary colleagues who made all this work possible. And finally, just want to say thanks to Luceda, to Kevin for the invitation to talk. Recently, we've been enjoying the Canvas schematic mode that got released. We found that it's nice for kind of early in the design, communicating ideas to people before we've actually invested to make a full layout. And then ultimately, at the end of the design cycle, documenting your designs under design control and a quality management system, which is an important part of submitting a medical device to the FDA or the EU, which is what we're on path for to actually bring this into your home. So I will leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kyle. It's so neat to see that the whole system in kind of a commercial format using integrated photonics, and very glad to hear that your use of Luceda IPKIS has been helpful, not only in the design and layout, but also in some of the things that go around the development of this really cool technology. That's awesome. Then to wrap it up, speaking of Luceda, I'd like to invite some words from Matt Delaney, technical sales manager at Luceda Photonics, who will share with us about how you can use Luceda software to create your PICs in silicon nitride. Matt, the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks for the introduction. I hope you can hear me and see the slides well.
Yes.
Yep, so this is just a quick presentation on the software that's kind of behind the scenes in a lot of the lovely presentations we've been looking at. Obviously, it's great to talk about the impact of these designs, but we're going to focus a little bit on how you can get there. So I'll try and be brief because I think there's going to be lots of interesting questions. But to introduce the company, Luceda Photonics is headquartered in Belgium, but we're a global company with foreign offices as well as resellers, so we cover the world. we have this quote which we like to sort of throw around, which is help photonic IC designers enjoy the same first time right experience as electronic IC designers. And anyone that has sort of worked in the semiconductor market will understand where this comes from. There, it's very common that you will do a design, you'll run some simulations, and you know 100% that your device is going to work. And for anyone in the photonics domain, that's kind of a little bit of a pipe dream at the moment. There's still quite a long iteration cycle on doing the design, tape out, measurement, and repeat. So really, our goal is to close that gap as much as we can. What does this kind of translate to in the real world? Well, obviously, the main thing is reducing design error. Even a small error can be catastrophic to a design. And one of the best ways to do that is by using a standard language. We use Python. It's widely used and interfaces with lots of different tools. And it's also very easy to learn. And through doing this, we offer lots of PDKs. So we support many different foundries, AIM obviously being the one we're talking about here today. And we try and improve the time to market by making all these different parts of the ecosystem work together in a way that's very, very flexible for the users. So just to kind of go through that a little bit more, as I mentioned, we have a standard library, a standard language, which is Python. And inside that language, you can define components, layouts, and simulations, and you can do that all parametrically. And really, this is where the power of our product is. It means that you can design a component like a grating cup or an MMI once, and then if you want to move to a different wavelength regime or a different material platform, the code you've written is still going to be applicable. You don't have to rewrite it. You're not kind of redesigning everything from scratch every time, and that really speeds up the design cycle. And also, if you've got validated code that you know has worked in the past, there's a very good chance it's going to keep working in the future. So again, it helps to reduce those errors. We also have what we call virtual fabrication. And this is where you can take a design and you can visualize cross sections of it and things like this. But even more than that, you can look at you can export it to simulation tools, or you can use our built-in EME simulator. And yes, the simulation tools that we link to currently are Lumerical, CST. There's also Dassault Simula, and there's a few more coming on the horizon as well. We have a code-driven circuit design approach. So what this means is that for a chip like this on the right, you could automate all the routing. What you'd say is you connect all the ports on my splitter tree, connect them to the grating array on the top, and the routing would be done for you in accordance with the minimum bend radius and separation and things like this. I've got to say, as someone that used to work as a designer, you spend, or at least I spend most of my time routing, and this is the biggest feature that has saved me time. It's also a fully parametric design. So in the example we can see in the corner, you could just say, actually, I want 64 outputs instead of 16, and it would all be resolved for you by the place and route engine. And as Carl mentioned, we also have a schematic capture tool called Canvas. This serves a few different niches. Obviously, it's really great at the start of a design. You can drag and drop things in intuitively and design circuits and use it as a communication tool. Then you can actually generate code from there and use that to kind of get a leg up on the design phase. It also has a nice application at the end, where if you did a design initially in Canvas, you can then finish the design in code, optimize it, do all the things you need to do, and then come back to it and compare your original code with your final code in Canvas, and really use that to verify that what you designed was indeed what you intended to. We also have what we call a tight link with layout and simulation. This means that we consider that the code that generates a layout is the source of truth. We don't want to be in a situation where you design a layout in one tool and then you simulate it in another and you have to rebuild the model, the vertices, the materials, things like this. For us, you have one file and everything comes from there, whether it's a circuit simulation or a fundamental simulation or generating a GDS. We also have our circuit solver called Caffe. This is a time and frequency domain solver that we can run at very large circuits. And you can use this again to kind of verify that the performance you expect is going to be in line with what you're fabricating. And here's a little video of someone navigating around Canvas. It's hierarchical, much like the layout design, so you can have a look through and really get an intuitive understanding for a design in a way that can be quite hard to do in a GDS file. I think I'm running a little bit short on time, so I'll race through these, but we also put a lot of effort into design validation, of course. Canvas makes it very easy to detect missing errors or shorted grounds and things like this, but also just to look at key parameters and phase matching, things of that sort. We also have full netlist extraction in the optical electrical domains, which can be used with other tools or indeed with ours to verify that your design is complete. And then finally, we have some post layout simulations, again using Caffe, that you can use to sort of verify that everything's connected in the right order and much more besides. I'm going to kind of skip through this, but we have a host of tools for tape out preparation, which include patching smaller acute angles or detecting snapping errors, things like this. The really common things that kind of delay our design at the end. And then obviously we export to GDS as the file type that most people want. We support a large range of PDKs. We have many partners in the industry. If you want to know more, all of this is on our website. Please get in touch. And otherwise, all I'd want to say is that we offer a lot of training and support to our customers. It's important to us and to them to make sure that they have a good experience and that we accelerate their learning trajectories. And to do that, we leverage our team. Finally, we do offer some services in support of PDKs particularly. So yeah, with that, I'd like to thank everyone that's been involved, and particularly to Kevin and Spark for setting this up and also the other attendees. Thanks very much.
That's great. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. So now we're going to open the floor up for questions. If you could please use the raise hand feature, which you should be able to find in the reactions button along the bottom of the Zoom screen. Let us know if you'd like to ask a question, or feel free to type your question in the chat, and we can go from there. All right, we have a question in the chat. Sandy B says, that was a wonderful session. My question is to Kyle. Usually the PIC-based sensors are sensitive to temperature and humidity. How do you ensure that your sensor works constantly on varying temperature and humidity?
Yeah, so a big part of that is going to be the shelf life of the cartridge. So it's the chip that's in it, as well as any chemical reagents that go along with it. And we do lifetime studies on these chips and these cartridges to understand what storage conditions do they need, and then how long are they going to last in the field. So pretty standard when it comes to at-home tests. Every COVID test had to go through similar kinds of verification and validation to get out the door. So what we found is that we're in a good spot for being able to actually ship a product like this. Thanks for the question.
All right, while we wait here, I'll actually follow that up, Matt. Sorry, Kyle. Do you have an idea of when the at-home testing will or could possibly be available in the market? I know it's a bit of a wild question, but if you could speculate.
Yeah, so the big thing, the huge milestone for us as a company will be to get to an FDA submission, which is a gigantic process behind that. Lots and lots of data to support that what you're doing is safe and effective to actually put it into people's homes. So can't speculate on the timeline too much. It might be possible to do studies along the way before that would give people kind of early access to it. So we're hoping to launch some opportunities like that for folks who want to try it out and get their hands on it. So.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, we have another question. Could you comment on the best solutions for mid-IR packaging? I'm not sure if that was targeted toward any of the presenters. If this person, M. Nazer, could unmute, we'd be happy to have you ask the question live. Okay, we'll come back to that one. We have another one here. The Canvas software looks really intuitive and user-friendly. Does Luceda have any PDK for integration of active lasers on the platform? Matt, I think that one will probably go to you.
I suspect so. Yes, essentially all of our standard PDKs will work with Canvas out of the box. So all the platforms that support actives already, in Canvas you'd see the same component as you would in the design library. So you could just drag in your laser and you're off to the races.
Fantastic. Thank you, Matt. We have another question from Sandy, a follow-up for Kyle. They're asking, how are you packaging the laser and detector? Is it on chip or off chip integration?
Yeah, so we unfortunately we haven't published too much about what's inside the reader instrument. There are chip-based components that are in there, but I'm afraid we haven't published too many details about it.
Great, we have a couple more coming in here from Deepak. I have a question to Kyle. There's a variability between the ring resonators on the chip. So how many measurements are required for your device to get a confidence of the results?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the chip I showed has 15 different individually addressable sensors on it. And really at the functionalization stage, that's where we get to pick which of those sensors do we want to be binding different analyte molecules that we're interested in. So it's kind of at that stage we get to program, do we want duplicate sensors for each analyte or triplicate or just single sensors? That really comes down to the performance and repeatability of the system. In general, we want at least duplicate sensors for each analyte that covers all your bases if something goes wrong, if one of the sensors gives you an aberrant signal or something like that. So that's the kind of phase that we're at. It's a great question.
Thanks, Kyle. You're not going to want to go off mute because we have another one for you here. How difficult is the packaging with microfluidics, especially to scale up the volume?
We've put a lot of time into microfluidics. We continue to put a lot of time into microfluidics. What I would say is that injection molding is a very powerful manufacturing technology. You can make very precise components out of that. So in the end, it's really a combination of silicon photonics plus injection molding, plus some other technologies that give us something that we think we can scale up to very large volumes. Yeah.
All right. We'll watch for some. I have another one here offline. Oh, all right. Are there PDKs which include plasmonic waveguides or plasmonic device integration within the silicon nitride platform? I think I'd toss that one over to Matt.
Sure. I can't say I know every component of every PDK, unfortunately. We support about 40 at this point. I don't think there are any standard plasmonic devices in the silicon nitride PDKs. However, I'm sure, as Amit was very keen to point out, that a lot of the foundries would be willing to work with you. So I think if you had questions, they'd be best addressed to the foundries and to see really what their capability is outside of the standard library.
Amit, it would be great to hear from you if you're hearing anything about plasmonics or any other devices in nitride that are top of mind.
Yeah, currently we don't have plasmonic devices supported in our platform, but we can talk to you about this. Yeah.
I had an offline question for Professor Hu. The question is, you've been a professor working in silicon nitride for quite a while. What are you seeing as the top few trends in the space? And I think this is referring to, you're doing more than sensing with silicon nitride. Is there anything you can comment on around silicon nitride as a platform for other applications, Professor Hu?
Yeah, I think for silicon nitride, obviously, sensing and fabrication, and I expect that with the low loss for the platform available, we're definitely going to see an explosion in US cases in that space. Besides that, I think silicon nitride is also quite promising and like visible photonics. Essentially pushing the operation rate to the visible.
Sorry, JJ, we're losing you a little bit. I don't know if there's a microphone issue there.
Okay. Is this any better?
Oh, much better. Thank you. Could you repeat what you said?
Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah. So basically, I'm saying that silicon nitride, I think the platform is definitely useful for sensing, especially with the low loss platform available now with AIM. I do see the possibility of having an explosion of this sensing applications. The other big area where I see a lot of potential is actually in visible photonics, transitioning from like conventional telecom to visible applications for things like LiDAR, display. I think that's also a really promising area where silicon nitride will be very useful.
Thank you very much. I know we've seen quite a bit of interest in quantum applications. with silicon nitride as well. I think that's a very exciting field for our industry.
And yes, definitely. That's an area I cannot comment too much on because I'm not an expert on that. But yes, I do know a lot of activities in that field.
I won't profess to be an expert in it either. All right.
You would think.
Yeah. Happy to take any additional questions from the audience. Maybe the last one, then we had an offline question. Oh, I'll go back to a couple online here. I'd like to ask Amit about expected dates for research prototyping in the UV and visible spectrum. Are the current PDK and tools from Luceda compatible with those wavelengths only by changing parameters?
So our visible PDK offering is a separate PDK that we have. The current silicon nitride PDK supports what we call as near silicon nitride NIR. That's how we are calling it. So it supports near infrared, but the visible one is a completely separate PDK. The expected dates, we don't have a date announced just yet. The technology is ready, but it's going to be sometime maybe in the next 1 year, I would say. So it's not way out in the future.
That's great. Matt, would you be able to comment on the second part of the question? Are current PDK and tools from Luceda compatible with those wavelengths only by changing parameters?
If the users know what they're doing, which maybe is a bit of a difficult question to answer, there's no reason you can't extend the use of a PDK. Typically, it would mean designing your own components and checking waveguide absorption losses and radiation losses and things like this. But the PDKs, the components are not wavelength agnostic, but the platform and the software behind it is. So it's a question of how much effort you want to put in and where you draw the line with the foundry, I think.
Thanks, Matt. And then we had one last question. We'll wrap up with this one. Can we use silicon nitride waveguides for 1600 to 1700 nanometer range? Does AIM Photonics PDK support this range? Amit, we'll put it to you.
Yeah, that's a good question. Actually, the limitation is the laser, which currently only goes up to 1640 nanometer, and actually beyond 1600, the laser power really starts to go down. So that is the limitation there. But up to 1640 is what we have tested. I don't know what happens beyond that.
Very good. Thank you, Amit. That is our time for today. Thanks to everybody for attending. We will be in touch with a recording of today's event. If you're interested in any of the topics presented today, please feel free to reach out directly to the presenters, or you can email info@sparkphotonics.com, and we'll be happy to connect you to the right person. Thanks, everybody, and hope to see you again soon.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.